Bill thought his marriage was uncheckable, the kind of love story neighbors whispered about with envy. But that illusion shattered the moment Dani walked into the room, holding the hand of her husband, smiling like the world had finally given her everything she ever wanted. Suddenly, Bill's perfect life didn't look so perfect anymore. And in episode 142 of Beyond the Gates, we finally saw what happens when pride collides with real happiness. The story begins in the heart of the gated neighborhood, where appearances matter more than truth, and every family fights to outshine the other. Episode 142 wastes no time in throwing us straight into the fire. The neighbors are preparing for Dani and her husband's anniversary celebration, and word spreads quickly that the evening will be grander than anything the community has ever witnessed. People whisper about the custom flowers, the handwritten vows, and even the orchestra hired for just one night. Everyone is buzzing, waiting to see how Dani's husband will raise the bar for romance. And then comes Bill, the man who always carried himself as though his marriage was the crown jewel of the block. His home was filled with laughter during community gatherings, his wife dressed elegantly at every event, and his smile was plastered on every photo like a proud badge. But underneath all that, there was a quiet tension. Bill needed validation. He needed everyone to believe that he had built the strongest marriage in town. For him, it wasn't just about love, it was about image. When Dani arrives, her happiness is undeniable. She isn't flaunting diamonds or parading wealth, but she radiates something Bill cannot fake: contentment. The way her husband looks at her, the way he holds her hand, the way they share inside jokes that no one else understands. It is a kind of intimacy that can't be bought, rehearsed, or staged. Instantly, the room feels different. Everyone notices. Some smile with admiration, while others, like Bill, stiffen with envy. The episode carefully frames this contrast. Dani doesn't need to prove anything, and that's exactly what makes her marriage glow. Bill, however, starts to feel exposed. In earlier episodes, he prided himself on grand gestures, expensive dinners, and loud declarations of love that were more about the audience than the couple. But here, against the effortless warmth of Dani's relationship, his theatrics begin to crumble. He watches Dani laugh freely, her joy unfiltered, while his own wife forces a smile beside him, aware that the comparison is unavoidable. The dinner scene becomes a battlefield without swords. Every toast, every conversation, every glance across the table is laced with unspoken judgment. Dani and her husband share a quiet story about how they first met, and the room melts with affection. Bill jumps in immediately, eager to share his own story, but his words sound rehearsed, stiff, and desperate. Instead of drawing admiration, he draws pity. People nod politely, but the spark that Dani ignited lingers in the air, making Bill's story feel hollow. By the end of the evening, the verdict is clear, even if no one says it aloud. Dani's marriage isn't just stronger, it's real. It thrives on trust, laughter, and mutual respect. Bill's, on the other hand, begins to look like a performance built on fragile ego. As the camera lingers on Bill's uneasy face, we know that the competition he created in his own head is about to consume him. What makes this recap so powerful is how it flips the usual dynamic. Bill was once the king of appearances, the man who set the tone for what a perfect couple should look like in Beyond the Gates. But in episode 142, Dani steps forward, not by force, but by authenticity. She doesn't play the game, yet she wins it without trying. And Bill, the self-declared champion, suddenly realizes that maybe he was never even in the same league. Episode 142 doesn't just show us Dani's happiness. It slowly peels back the layers of what makes her marriage shine and what makes Bill's fall apart. The brilliance of this episode is in its small details, those subtle glances, awkward pauses, and meaningful silences that say more than any dialogue ever could. Let's break down the 4 key moments that truly define this clash of marriages. The first moment comes during Dani's anniversary dinner. The neighborhood had been buzzing for days about what her husband might do, and the night did not disappoint. He stood up to give a toast, and instead of talking about wealth, success, or public displays. He spoke about the quiet moments, the mornings when Dani made coffee just the way he liked it, the evenings when they walked hand in hand around the block without needing to say a word, the days when she pushed him to believe in himself. It was intimate, raw, and real. The room went silent not because it was grand, but because it was honest. People leaned in, not wanting to miss a single word. And then there was Dani, her eyes glistening, not with shock or surprise, but with the look of someone who had already lived those words every single day. That was the moment Bill's façade started to crack. The second moment is one of pure envy. Bill, unable to sit quietly in Dani's shadow, decides to rise and offer his own toast. His words tumble out too quickly, trying to mirror the authenticity of Dani's husband, but falling short at every turn. He talks about expensive vacations, luxury gifts, and sacrifices he has made, but the more he speaks, the colder the room becomes. His wife sits there with an uncomfortable smile, almost begging him to stop, but Bill can't. His pride won't let him. When he finishes, there's a polite clap, but it feels forced, empty. Everyone knows he was performing, and the contrast is brutal. The third moment belongs not to Bill or Dani, but to the neighbors. Gossip is the fuel of Beyond the Gates, and episode 142 leans into it beautifully. In whispered corners and sly glances, the neighbors trade thoughts. Did you see how Dani's husband looked at her? One says. I don't think Bill has ever looked at his wife like that. Another replies. These lines sting, not just for Bill, but for us as viewers, because they highlight the truth we've all seen but no one dares say aloud. Bill's marriage has always been about the performance, never the partnership. The more the neighbors whisper, the more Bill feels the walls close in around him. The community that once praised him now begins to doubt him. The fourth and final key moment is Bill's desperate attempt to reclaim the spotlight. Later that evening, when Dani's husband surprises her with a simple handwritten letter, nothing fancy, just heartfelt words from his soul, Bill snaps. He tries to counter with his own gesture, pulling out a grand gift he had prepared, but instead of admiration, he receives silence. His wife's eyes don't sparkle, the neighbors don't cheer, and Dani doesn't even look impressed. The scene is painful because it isn't about what Bill gives, but what he fails to understand. Love isn't a stage performance. It isn't about outdoing someone else. It's about the quiet honesty between two people. And that's the one thing Bill can't fake. What makes these key moments unforgettable is the way they build on each other. Dani and her husband never set out to compete, yet they win every unspoken battle simply by being genuine. Bill, on the other hand, loses more ground every time he tries to prove himself. His actions expose the weakness of his marriage, a relationship where pride and appearances matter more than real affection. By the end of the night, the audience doesn't just pity him. They start to fear for him. Because envy, once it takes root, doesn't stop at embarrassment. It grows into obsession, and that obsession threatens to unravel everything Bill has built. This section of the episode is where the tension transforms from casual rivalry into something darker. It's no longer just about Dani being happier than Bill. It's about the danger of a man who can't handle being second best. And in Beyond the Gates, when pride is bruised, consequences always follow. Every drama, no matter how flashy or loud, always comes down to the people at its core. Episode 142 of Beyond the Gates isn't really about anniversaries, parties, or neighborhood gossip. It's about two marriages standing side by side, exposing the difference between love that is lived and love that is staged. Dani and Bill are the perfect mirrors for this contrast. And the way their characters unfold in this episode reveals more than just their relationships. It reveals the very heart of the show's theme, Dani's marriage. For starters, has always been painted as stable but quiet. Unlike other characters, she never flaunted her happiness. She didn't invite the neighbors over just to show off her home. She didn't throw elaborate dinners to make people talk. Dani's joy was subtle, tucked away in the little rituals she shared with her husband, a late-night tea, long walks, notes left in each other's books. For most of the season, This didn't attract much attention because it wasn't dramatic enough. But in this episode, when those rituals are spoken out loud, they suddenly feel monumental. The audience realizes that the little things Dani values are actually the foundation of something unshakable. Her marriage isn't glamorous, but it's real, and that reality outshines anything else in the room. The beauty of the writing here is how it doesn't demonize either character. Dani isn't shown as a saint, and Bill isn't shown as pure villain. Instead, the episode explores universal themes through them. Dani represents the theme of authenticity, the idea that love thrives in honesty, even if it's imperfect. Bill represents the theme of envy, the danger of comparing your life to someone else's and trying to outdo them instead of nurturing what you already have. Together, they paint a picture of the show's larger message. Appearances will always collapse when tested against truth. Another layer of this dynamic is how the community reacts. Beyond the Gates has always been a show about collective judgment, how neighbors serve as both witnesses and judges of each other's lives. In episode 142, the neighborhood becomes a silent jury. Every glance they give Dani and her husband feels like approval. Every awkward silence toward Bill feels like disapproval. This creates pressure that amplifies both marriages. Dani glows brighter in the warmth of community admiration, while Bill crumbles under the weight of their doubt. The theme here is that community validation, while powerful, can also be dangerous. It turns private lives into performances, and performances are never sustainable. But perhaps the most haunting theme of the episode is foreshadowed in the smallest moments. Dani's marriage appears flawless, but the camera lingers a little too long on her smile, as if asking us to question whether it hides something deeper. Bill's downfall is obvious, but the show hints that Dani's perfection might not be as unshakable as it seems. This is the genius of Beyond the Gates. It doesn't just settle for showing us envy. It warns us that perfection itself is fragile. By the end of this section of the story, the characters feel like archetypes, Dani as the symbol of authenticity, Bill as the victim of comparison, but they also feel painfully human. We've all been Dani, content in small joys, not needing the world's approval. And we've all been Bill, hungry for recognition, secretly comparing ourselves to others, desperate to prove we measure up. That's why this episode resonates so deeply. It isn't just about these two characters. It's about us. In Beyond the Gates, love is never just love. It's pride, envy, vulnerability, and survival, all rolled into one. Episode 142 reminds us that the strongest relationships are not the loudest ones. And the most dangerous rivalries don't always end with shouting. Sometimes they end with silence, envy, and the slow unraveling of someone who wanted too much. If there's one thing that Beyond the Gates does better than any other show, it's sparking conversations that refuse to die down. The moment episode 142 aired, social media lit up like fireworks. Fans weren't just watching Dani and Bill's clash. They were living it, dissecting it, and turning it into the talk of the week. And honestly, the reactions are almost as entertaining as the episode itself. One of the loudest responses came from viewers who absolutely adored Dani's husband. His heartfelt speech, his simple but powerful gestures, his way of looking at Dani like she was the only person in the room, fans couldn't get enough. This man just raised the bar for every husband on the planet. One comment read, followed by hundreds of likes. Another fan joked, "Somebody tell my husband to start taking notes from Dani's man." It was clear. People weren't just watching Dani's marriage. They were wishing they had one like it. Then came the avalanche of memes. Bill's desperate toast, his forced smile, the way he looked around the room trying to measure the crowd's reaction. Fans turned those moments into instant classics. Screenshots of Bill's expression, paired with captions like, "When you try too hard but still fail," or "Me pretending to enjoy my cousin's cooking," spread across timelines like wildfire. The internet has a ruthless sense of humor, and in this case, Bill became the punchline of episode 142, but the commentary wasn't just jokes. Many fans dug deeper into what this episode says about marriage and human nature. Bill's problem isn't that his wife doesn't love him. One fan wrote, It's that he wants the world to validate him more than he wants his wife to. Others pointed out how Dani's relationship highlighted the importance of private happiness over public image. These weren't just casual observations. They were proof that the episode struck a chord far beyond the drama. Fans were connecting the dots between the show and their own lives, admitting that they too had felt envy or had measured themselves against others in ways that hurt them more than helped them. And of course, Number Beyond the Gates conversation is complete without wild theories. Some viewers insisted that Dani's marriage is too perfect and that the writers must be setting us up for a fall. Nobody's that happy in this show, one fan argued. There has to be a secret. Maybe Dani's husband has a past we don't know about. Another theory suggested that Bill's breakdown in this episode is just the start, and that his envy will spiral into something dangerous in upcoming episodes. Fans weren't just reacting. They were predicting, speculating, and fueling the fire for what's to come. What's fascinating about these reactions is how split the audience became. On one side, you had Team Dani, the viewers who cheered for her happiness and defended her marriage as authentic and inspiring. On the other side, there were those who, strangely enough, sympathized with Bill. They saw his desperation not just as arrogance, but as insecurity, the kind that lives quietly in many of us. "I don't like Bill," one fan confessed, "but I get him. I've been him." That kind of comment is powerful because it shows how the show blurs the line between fiction and reality. Bill might be a character, but his flaws are very human. And let's not forget the humor in all this. Beyond the serious commentary, fans made light of the episode in ways only the internet can. GIFs of Dani's glowing smile were labeled relationship goals. Videos of Bill fumbling through his toast were clipped and remixed into parody edits. Some fans even staged mock toasts at home, recording themselves making grand, over-the-top speeches before being interrupted with a caption that read, "When Bill tries to compete with Dani." This blending of satire and admiration created a wave of content that kept the episode alive long after the credits rolled. In many ways, the fan reactions are proof that episode 140 did its job perfectly. It wasn't just another installment in the series. It was a cultural moment within the fandom. It pushed people to laugh, argue, reflect, and even challenge their own views about love and appearances. And that's the secret strength of Beyond the Gates. It doesn't just tell a story. It pulls its audience into the drama, making them feel like neighbors themselves, whispering over the fence, taking sides, and gossiping about whose marriage really deserves the spotlight. By the time the dust settled online, one thing was clear: Dani's marriage may belong to the fictional world of Beyond the Gates, but the emotions it stirred, admiration, envy, doubt, laughter, were very, very real. And Bill, well, he may not have won the admiration of the neighbors, but he certainly gave the fans a performance they won't stop talking about anytime soon.